Okay, 8th graders, we have come to our last lesson in Chapter 1. Make sure that you are not doing this lesson, Chapter 1-2, except at the very end. This one should follow Lesson 1-8B. Problem solving. There are 3 things that you really want to keep in mind when you are looking at a story problem. First of all, you have to read carefully to understand the problem. Look for your operation clue words. Go back to one of the earliest lessons in this chapter. I believe it's 1-1A, where we talked about writing expressions. What are the clue words for addition, for subtraction, for multiplication, for division? Secondly, plan how to solve the problem. What do I use? Add, subtract, multiply, divide, a combination of the two. And then solve it. Don't forget, too, that maybe you need to draw yourself a diagram or make a table to help you. Thirdly, once you're finished, look back. Does your answer make sense? Example 1. An air traffic controller needs to find the difference between the altitudes of 2 airplanes. Airplane A is 3,800 feet above the clouds. Above the clouds. Airplane B is at an altitude of 5,500 feet above the ground. Above the ground. The clouds are at 12,000 feet altitude. What is the difference in the altitudes of airplane A and airplane B? And that very first sentence, what should jump out at you, is this clue word right here, difference. It appears again in the question, difference. A difference is the answer to a subtraction problem. So you may think, I bet I have to subtract. Now remember I told you that sometimes it's helpful to make a diagram? So maybe that's a good thing to do. Let's say that we will make a line for the ground. One of the things it tells us is that you have airplane A, which is above the clouds, and airplane B, which is above the ground. The clouds are at 12,000. So one way to do that is to draw a line up here and put clouds and the altitude, which is 12,000 feet. Now it says airplane A is 3,800 feet above the clouds. The last thing we're told is about airplane B, and that airplane B, I'm going to have to extend my line here, is at an altitude of 5,500 feet above the ground. In this particular problem, we are actually going to have to do 2 operations. We want to know the difference in the altitudes. When we talk about the altitude of an airplane, we are usually talking about above the ground. So we are going to have to calculate how far airplane A is above the ground. The altitude for airplane A is going to be 12,000 plus the 3,800. Now we know that airplane A is 15,800 feet above the ground. Now we can work with the difference between A and B because we have them in kind of like the same terms. They're both above the ground. So our answer is going to be found by taking the 15,800 and subtracting the 5,500. And we'll need a label of 10,300 feet. It's okay to make yourself a diagram. Now I've made a very simple one here. You could actually, I suppose, get more elaborate, but remember, you have quite a few problems to do. You probably want to keep it as simple as possible to save time. Let's look at sample 2. Now sample 2, example 2, is actually done easier if you do it with equations rather than trying guessing and checking. We could take something like, okay, Joe is 5 years older than Brian, and the sum of their ages is 25. So I can think to myself, all right, what numbers add up to 25? 1 and 24. Well, the difference between 1 and 24 isn't 5. 2 and 23. Not going to work. Got to get numbers closer together. You can be sitting there for a while guessing and checking. And to be frank, we're going to be learning how to do these with equations. It's an algebraic skill. You're going to have to learn anyway. So we might as well start now by using algebra equations to work this. We know that Joe is older than Brian, so let's let Brian's age be X. And Joe, since he's 5 years older, let's let that be X plus 5. The sum is addition. So if we add Brian's age plus Joe's age, we should have 25. We've added like terms before this year. X plus X means we have 2X. We also have the plus 5, and it equals 25. And here again, we're going back to what you learned last year to solve this equation. We are first going to subtract the 5 from both sides. 5 minus 5 is 0, but we still have the 2x. 25 minus 5 is 20. We're going to divide both sides by the 2. 2 times x, we undo with the opposite divide. X equals 10. Now, X is Brian's age. So X is 10 years, and that's Brian. But the question says, how old is each boy? So X plus 5 has to be 10 plus 5, which equals 15 years old, which is then Joe's age. Now this can work a whole lot faster sometimes than doing guessing and checking. What if we had had two things to add together and the sum would have been in the hundreds? That would have felt almost unsolvable to some of us. Let's look at example 3. This is what we call a combination problem. Fred is making a set of blocks for his baby brother. He will make one block in each of 6 different colors with 3 shapes and 2 different sizes. How many blocks will be in his set? Let's try to look at this for what would happen if we have one color of block, like green, and he uses 3 shapes. Let's say a round one, a triangular one, and more of a cube one. He makes a large and a small in each one. If you'll count that out, you'll find that for green blocks, he has to have 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's for one color. He has 6 colors. So what we do in a combination problem is take the 6 colors times the 3 shapes times the 2 different sizes, and we find out that he is going to have 36 blocks for his baby brother. How many ways can you give 15 cents in change? These types of problems work beautifully if you make a table, and then make sure you stay organized in that table. Let's say that we have pennies, dimes, and nickels. Easiest way to make 15 cents, pick one of these coins to start with. I'm going to start with pennies. You can have 15 pennies, or you can have 15 pennies, 0 dimes, and 0 nickels. Now, I'm going to actually go with the nickels rather than the dimes. I know that 5 pennies equals a nickel. So I'm going to have 10 pennies and 1 nickel. That means 0 dimes. If I take another 5 pennies, I will have 5 pennies. That gives me another nickel. I still have 0 dimes. Well, if I take those last 5 pennies, I'll have 0 pennies, 0 dimes, and I will have 3 nickels. Now I can start to think, all right, but instead of taking only 5 pennies at a time, a dime is 10 pennies. So if I took 10 pennies from the 15 and left me with 5, that could give me a dime, and I would have no nickels, but I would have 15 cents. The last thing I have to look at is I could really have 15 cents by taking 1 dime, and instead of 5 pennies, I could add a nickel. Now if I count, I have 6 ways. The question says, how many ways? 6 ways. And that concludes the last lesson in Chapter 1.